Welcome to another session of Detail Research and HE Researcher session. We've got Professor Phillip Dawson here with us today, all the way from Australia. And good morning and good evening to you, depending on where you are. I'm Puyin, Head of Digital Education at the University of Birmingham. I'm not going to do the main intro today because we've got a guest host, but I will intro my dream team. That is John.
Hello, I'm John Brindle, PhD student at Lancaster University and Learning Design Manager at Edge Hill University.
And I'm going to introduce our guest host, and she's going to introduce Phil for us. So with us here today, we have Dr. Jo Elliott, who is a reader in learning design at Queen Mary University of London, a former colleague of mine and an awesome friend and a fellow cat lover. So I'll hand the stage over to you, Jo.
Thanks, Puyin. And welcome, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce Professor Phillip Dawson. Phil, I was lucky enough to be able to work with Phil at Deakin University, where he is the co-director of the Centre for Research in Assessment and Digital Learning, or CRADLE. I'd heard great things about Phil before I joined Deakin, both in terms of his research and also of Phil as a person. And I have to say that the reality actually exceeded the reputation. Phil's work on feedback, cheating, and artificial intelligence in assessment is highly cited, as I'm sure many of you know, and he ranks 6th internationally in the field of higher education research over the last 5 years. Now, Phil would put this down to a mixture of being strategic in what he does and doesn't work on, and a mixture of luck and circumstances. But I have to say that he is also one of the cleverest people I know, and incredibly generous in terms of sharing knowledge and advice to up-and-coming researchers as well. And as you're about to discover, he is also incredibly funny. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Phil to tell us a little bit about his journey so far. Over to you, Phil.
Oh, thanks so much, Jo. It's an absolute joy to see you. It's a real shame that we lost you, and you are really missed at Deakin. Yeah, it's still a great place, but yeah, I think you brought a certain criticality at that kind of intersection of technology and pedagogy that's really valuable. So yes, we miss you. Yes, I'm Phil. I think I know vaguely some of you. I don't know some of the others of you. I'm a professor here at Cradle Deakin Uni, I'm in my basement right now because it's 7:30 at night here in Melbourne. But yes, I'm a professor here. And I have this weird joy of being a research-only academic in higher education, which I understand is a bit of an anomaly in a lot of places. Probably the place that we are most similar to would be the group at Lancaster, the Higher Ed Studies group. So it's really nice to have this great connection with you all over there. All right, so I'm just checking in. You can see slide 1, being a strategic researcher without being evil. And that's it's kind of what I'd like to talk about. I am unashamedly strategic in my work, but I do sometimes worry that it can drive someone to almost selfishness, self-aggrandizing sort of behavior and all that. And I wrestle with that myself in my own work. I'm going to talk vaguely around this structure. It's going to be provocative stuff that you might disagree with, and I'm hoping that really drives some discussion. I'm not like being disingenuous or edgy or something throughout. I just think sometimes I have a somewhat different view on some of this stuff, and I'd really love to be challenged to talk about it. The slide design's terrible, and I'm going to cover why the slide design is terrible later. I'm going to start with some disclaimers. It's actually a fair bit of disclaimer, but I actually think that disclaimers are quite useful in how we think about our research careers. And I've got sort of pauses throughout for discussion, but we're a small group. Just like find a way to interject in the chat, hands up, unmute your mic, whatever it is that works for you to have a chat. I want to start, my first disclaimer is the neoliberalism disclaimer. Like, we're all in this system of higher ed that's broken and is being made more broken by successive governments, and it could really feel like you're pushing the proverbial uphill, and you want to fight it and you want to stop it and you want to change it, but also you've got to eat and you may have other people that you provide for, and we need to make a living in this system. So it's really difficult. I run a comedy show. The comedy show is called The Peer Review, and we recently had an academic on. We get academics to talk about their research, then we do improv about their research. We had Professor Jill Blackmore AM, who's like a real superstar higher ed researcher and very critical of neoliberal higher education. And she was talking about all these, stupid metrics and whatever, and she was getting really sweary about it all. And she pointed to me and said, "What's your H index?" And I said, "It's 40." And I knew that. And I've become that. And I can tell you, I can quote all those metrics to you. Her H index is much greater than mine. I doubt she knows that. But I also think there's sort of a privilege that those of us at the height of things have of being able to question and challenge and all of that and call it out as bullshit if we want to. But I wouldn't say everyone has the obligation to. Don't try and publish in a high impact journal, publish in somewhere, ethical and all of that, and you'll do well. Because I actually think that's not great advice. I think if you're thinking about where should I publish, you should probably publish your work in the best possible outlet. And to give you advice that you should, publish in some open access thing that gets very small readership and whatever, for ethical reasons, is for me to not be that ethical. So this is just me saying I'm a product of this neoliberal system that demands that we have lots of papers and lots of citations and all of that. And you kind of got to play that game. Now, there's a statement there, H index, I've not heard of that, which is either a genuine thing or not. But I'm just going to explain H index. Your H index is the number of papers you have that have at least that same number of citations. So you will see what my early career H index was, and it was not very big. It was 5, and that meant I had 5 papers that had been cited 5 times, and some of them had been cited more than that. These metrics are garbage, but these metrics are also used to judge us in some contexts, and there'll be different metrics and whatever else. This is me just saying we need to fight the thing, but also we need to survive the thing as well. Okay, that's disclaimer 1. Disclaimer 2, privilege. I don't know how much you have seen the academic wheel of privilege. I think this is a really useful way to think about how some people have got a whole bunch of advantage in academia, and higher ed studies is no different. You can see that there are a range of different things there. There's a group around education and career, gender and sexuality, race, health and well-being, childhood and development, living and culture, and caregiving. And the closer you are to the center of that wheel, the more sort of academic privilege you have. And I'm in the first circle or the second circle exclusively. I'm nowhere in the third circle. I recognize that as a cis het white man, and a whole bunch of other inner circle things. I've had a whole bunch of advantages here. So when you hear career advice from someone who is largely in that center part of the circle, maybe their career advice is actually largely shaped by, all of these advantages. And we should question how much we sort of see that as a successful way forward. Academia's got to be for everyone. It's got to be for everyone across all of that diversity there. So this is me doing a disclaimer that I am there. I mean, I'm also coming to you live from stolen land, the land of the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nations. The very place I am disrupted a whole system of education that had been here for 40,000 or more years. So privilege does have a big role to play here when we're talking about academic career advice. Another disclaimer, the attribution error. Too often we attribute career success or just people's actions in general to their own agency rather than the circumstances they find themselves in. So attributing things to character over the context people find themselves in. I actually find this fundamental attribution error to be really useful in a whole bunch of different contexts. I do research on cheating. I think the problem of student cheating, we make a fundamental attribution error there as well. We say cheating is the cause of students' moral failings. They did the wrong thing. Whereas actually a lot of it is the cause of context. It's just we make this fundamental attribution error to say it's you rather than the circumstances you find yourself within. And Alfie Kohn has written about that in the context of cheating. Another disclaimer, things are so much harder now. This is my Google Scholar profile. And when I got my continuing research-only associate professor role in 2015, I had some papers that looked like they were probably going to go pretty well, but I had less than 5 on the H index and fewer than 100 citations. And that just would not happen now at my institution. And I can say that because I recently interviewed for a senior lecturer job. So we had that advertised, and you would not have got an interview for that job with the publication profile I had when I got a more senior job. You just wouldn't have got an interview. The level of competitiveness out there has risen so much. So really, when you hear career advice from people in professor positions about getting junior roles based on their experiences, they had it so much easier. All right, I've got 2 more slides of disclaimers. This one is, it's who you know. There was some analysis done on the journal Assessment and Evaluation in Higher Education. My read on that analysis is the number one factor determining if you're going to be one of the most published and cited authors in that journal is if you have ever published with David Bowd. It really seemed like it was the biggest factor. I had the benefit of meeting Dave when I had just got my PhD. I was writing a grant application and I had to write something in assessment. So I'm like, who are the big people in assessment? I'll just invite them onto the project. And Dave took a chance on me as someone who had never got a grant before, joined the team, and we started working together. Oh gosh, I love this period in the chat. My supervisor told me when he was a PhD student, a prof told him, where there are deaths, there are opportunities. Yeah, I've also heard it framed, academia moves forward one funeral at a time. Yeah, but it is a thing that we do, senior academics do tend to hold on to roles for a very long time. But yeah, there is just a thing of knowing certain people and publishing with them can help you to understand how higher ed works. But this is slightly troubling that sort of Dave's citation network seems to be so prominent here. And I really hope that sort of this journal finds a way to kind of broaden things out to a bigger group of people. It's a fantastic journal. It's my favorite journal, but I recognize that sort of a dominance by a small set of people isn't a great thing. And a final disclaimer, survivorship bias. So the 0.1% of people who succeed using some particular method are there saying, you just got to do this and you'll succeed. But then the almost everyone who failed using that method, you never hear from them. It's like if I told you as a multi-million-dollar lottery winner, that's hypothetical. If I told you all you got to do is buy lottery tickets and you'll make it, well, it worked for me, but it might not necessarily work for you. So really question the advice that you hear from people. Okay, that's the disclaimer. I want to know, though, what other things do you think really play into academic career success, particularly research success, that I haven't covered here? What are the other things that you might be thinking, yeah, Phil, you had it easy because of this, or I can't because of these other factors? And the chat, or just go for it.
I'm going to go. I'll put myself out there. Motivation. Sometimes it's hard to get motivated.
Yeah, I agree. And I think at different moments in your life, it's maybe easier to get motivated. At other moments, it's harder. I've noticed sort of my work patterns are different now that I have kids, and sort of zealous passion is no longer in me in the same way that it once was. I kind of want to get stuff done, and then get out of there. I think Kathy's mentioned methodology, and that is really key. You can have a wonderful methodology that people in your field are biased against for weird and wacky and wonderful reasons. And no matter how well you do this method and how appropriate the problems are that you apply it to, you can struggle to get those papers published, get that grant success. And it's nothing to do with you or the work. It's pure methodological bias. You know, we've had and continue to have paradigm wars in educational research. And if you find yourself in a group of people that don't quite agree, you can be stuffed. I was in a school of education. I worked there, where the associate head of school let out a sort of memo. It was titled "Things That Get Up Our Nose." And it was a long list of things. And one of them was quantitative anything. And I immediately thought, wow, I actually don't mind quantitative research sometimes, and I use it sometimes, but to know that the senior research leaders in the school are that against it, they put out a bit of a missive about it, made me feel like, oh gosh, I don't really have a way to have my research valued here. A supportive community, yes, that can be an amazingly powerful thing. And I think it's supportive in helping you to achieve your best, sometimes challenging you, really great people who will give you comments on your work, really great mentors. We have a comment about discipline paradigm shifts. Oh, yeah, another people dying one. Being in the right place at the right time, absolutely, absolutely. You can have an amazing idea 20 years too soon. You can not be with a group of people who really are willing to back you on that idea and have that sort of cohesion. One of the big things I love about Cradle is that we set a shared strategic agenda, and it's quite narrow. And that way we are actually all really excited about things together. And I would really say, if anyone is setting up a research group, one of the big mistakes you can make is going too broad. Actually getting people together around a more narrow topic can help build that sort of right place at the right time, where you have the critical mass of people. You can progress an idea and you can get excited together. Fame of the institution, yes. There was a Twitter debate recently where someone invoked me as some sort of, great researcher who'd published this great paper, and someone in the replies to it said, well, if he's that great, why is he working at Deakin University, which is clearly a third-rate institution? And they posted a few replies about how bad an institution Deakin is. Now, I've got to say, I love Deakin. I really like Deakin's mission, and I have worked at research-intensive elite universities, and I don't quite like that mission. So I'm really happy at a balanced teaching and research sort of institution. But you'll note on the privilege wheel, that's in the kind of middle tier. People in the research intensives are in that more privileged space. How much time, investment, support those around you give you? Absolutely. Tricky, not getting feedback, having people to bounce ideas with. Totally. On the thing about investment as well, I think money matters. Part of my ability to do research in the early part of my career was that grant that I got. I included some funding for my time in that grant, and I bought out my marking, which David Bowd, my co-director of Cradle, thinks was a terrible thing for me to do, and it probably was. And as an assessment scholar, it's not something that sits super comfortably with me, but I paid someone else to do the marking for me, officially using the university's systems, not like cash in hand. But that enabled me to get a start on my research. It wasn't very much, but it enabled me to carve out that time. Oh gosh, there's a mention of collaborative autoethnographic studies, getting them published. Gee, it's fascinating how biased against autoethnography people can be. Support from your circle, husband, wife, parents. Yes, absolutely. When I was writing my first sole-authored book, my only sole-authored book, I took 7 weeks away from my regular duties to write it. And in that time period, I had Professor Rolla Ajawi come in and do my job for me. But I also, on the home front, had my wife step in and, do a little bit more with the kids at particular points in time. And I know that that's something that a lot of men use to enable their career success. There's a great book by an Australian author, I believe it's Annabelle Crabb, called The Wife Drought, which is about how we don't have enough wives. Not like wives for men, but just wives, the traditional sort of wife for everyone. Women don't have access to this sort of, traditional wife character that steps in and does everything domestically. But traditionally, men do have access to that. And that's absolutely something that is part of privilege. Late start in academia, yes, absolutely. It seems like we ignore everything you have done prior to your PhD and outside of that world. Institutional priorities, yes. Time, nature of the role, amount of flexibility, yes, absolutely. Time is really what it takes to do research. There's kind of no other way around it. And the same teaching and learning delivery, totally. In a department that's going through a cycle of instability, yeah, you can find yourself having to kind of be the glue that holds things together. Angela Brew and David Bowd and some colleagues wrote a paper where they looked at the types of work that people do. And there was one type of work that kind of really got devalued, but was necessary for the whole place to run. And it was these academic artisans, people that do the stuff that's not quite teaching, not quite research. It's not low-level administration, but it's really necessary to keep the whole place running. Collegiality, trustworthiness, yes. Funding demographic, yes. Millionaire husband would work as well. I would settle for one of them too. And then institutional imperatives for 3-year PhDs, yes. The 3-year PhD really doesn't give you time to produce this huge body of research papers. Okay, we have addressed a whole bunch of stuff, and these factors all play a role in career success. And with that as a backdrop, I would like to tell you some things that have worked for me. They may not work for you for all that huge lot of reasons, and also because they might just be bullshit. But these are things that I hold dear to my heart as things that have helped me. So being a strategic researcher, I'm going to talk about it when writing, when collaborating, and when doing engagement work. And that's kind of how I'm going to carve out the rest of this time. The first thing I'm going to say is do interesting work. I'm going to kind of butcher RuPaul's thing that said at the end of every episode, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? I'm going to butcher that to say, if you don't love your topic, how the hell is anybody else going to love it? So often I talk to someone about a paper that they are writing and they are not interested in it. And I want to give you permission. I want to let you walk away from this and actually drop a paper you have right now that's half written that you don't love. Because finishing that one off is going to be more time consuming, more soul destroying than ditching it and going and writing a new paper that you really love. So I want you to be excited and interested about the work that you do. And also, I want you to absolutely sweat over the sell of the paper. So I want you to care so much about how you get other people excited about it, because this sort of interest and excitement matters so much at having a sustainable research career. I'm going to talk a little bit about a structure that I like to use to do that sell of the paper. It's Lorelei Lingard's problem gap hook heuristic. The most common comment that I make as a reviewer, as a supervisor, as a co-author, as a critical friend is there's no clear problem established in this paper. And I would really love for, if you haven't engaged with this problem gap hook idea, you have my permission to jump off the call now and just go access that. Like, it is so good, or save it for later. The basic argument is an introduction should first establish a problem. Now, this is a problem that matters to people in the world. It's not just something that matters to us peculiar researchers. It's a problem that matters in the world. And I think this is particularly important for us as higher ed researchers, because our audience is peculiar. They know how to read a research article, but they don't always know a lot about higher ed studies. Whereas someone reading a chemistry paper probably knows a bit about chemistry, but a lot of people reading higher ed papers don't know a lot about higher ed teaching and learning. So I'm going to say, start with that really great problem. And I show up to meetings with my colleagues, my co-authors, and pitch a problem, and they say to me, that's boring, that's not a problem. And we have very robust conversations with each other about this. And if you can get people who can be that honest with you and say that's actually, the problem is actually kind of boring. Is there a way you could reshape it? And actually sit with you and spend an hour on shaping that problem up, that is gold. So I'm really going to encourage you to look into that problem. The gap in the literature, something we don't know. The problem is not the gap. One of the biggest struggles that we have is people trying to pitch a problem that takes the form of, we don't know enough about something. That's a gap. And then the hook is, if you read my paper, you will get this. You will be able to do this. Here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll find out. Single biggest thing you could take away from this talk is that problem gap hook formation. That's how you get people excited about your work. On writing as well, I want to highlight that write every day is bullshit for me. And it might be for you as well. So often, like, I think a lot of us have had this advice that you've got to write every day. And it just kind of doesn't work for everyone. And the evidence on which it was based is not very good. Helen Sword went and did some great work actually looking at the habits of effective writers, effective academic writers, and found there's no one true formula. The paper on the left there really looks at writing every day and the evidence behind it. And then the book on the right is a book about how to write. And it explores kind of a range of things from a lot of research that Helen Sword did into successful academic writers about, how do they get it to work? And it's really diverse, and there's no one true formula. But I really recommend that book for understanding what the diversity of options are. That book title, Air and Light and Time and Space, is also the title of a poem by Bukowski, who sort of argues that if you're a real creative, you'll be able to write when you're in a freezing cold apartment with a screaming baby and no food in the fridge and, stuff all of that privilege and whatever. If you've really got it in you, you'll be able to write. And I really disagree with that sort of framing. I think that Helen Sword's version of Air and Light and Time and Space that, we do need things that can help shape us and make us more productive, can be helpful. I wrote a little blog post about how that book of hers helped me write my first book as well, which if you search that book and me, you would find that. Now, I want to know from you, what do you do to be strategic with your writing? How do you get stuff done with writing? What works for you? We do have one in there about moments of inspiration while walking my dogs, and I love that. And they're, that sort of doing something else to think about the thing that you're doing, or even just to take a break. We so often actually take a break in academia. I don't know if people have watched the show House, the Hugh Laurie one where he's the horrible doctor. There's so many scenes in that show where he's by himself thinking. And there's so few scenes in my life as an academic where I'm by myself just thinking. And when I do give myself those moments, I think I actually am a lot more productive later and have a lot more cool ideas. In the chat, we have chocolate. Yes, I actually got my chocolate out before and I broke it and I was about to eat it and then I got accepted onto the call. So I'm very much waiting to eat that chocolate when this is over. Video games, yes. I won't hold up my video game paraphernalia, but yeah, I have a Steam Deck here, which is my little gaming tool. But yeah, whatever can help get you out of that. Having a collaborator, yes, absolutely. I think some people find collaborators give a sense of responsibility to someone else. You owe them something, and it helps propel you and push you forward. I would also say, for me, part of my productivity has been not always having a collaborator and having some stuff that I can write, and I never have any excuses for why I'm waiting on someone else. So I've always got what I call a no excuses paper that I'm working on, where it's all on me. You can do this. There's no reason to be procrastinating on that paper now. Get writing done before anything else, early morning. A lot of people do say early morning. I can't manage to make it work. But again, the Helen Sword's book acknowledges that, yep, people definitely do that. Building on experiences, yes. If you can incorporate yourself and what you've done in your life, yes. Having collaborator, looming deadline, meetings with collaborators, yes. I think some people use journal special issues as a way to do this as well. Edited collections, some people like to write book chapters in that way, though I'm going to, again, say something that might not be that great. I try and do as few edited book chapters as I can because hardly anybody reads them, and I write for people to read. I really do. So I'm going to, no one's mentioned edited collections, but I'm giving you permission to say no to the next edited collection someone tries to get you to do. Have some, rather than rely on that external deadline, try and put that energy into writing something for a great journal, your favorite journal, the one that you want to read. Tell someone I'm going to write a thing, that sort of external accountability, yes. Deadlines, rewards, yes. Being super busy, in the shower, having that moment of quiet, yes, absolutely. And for me, I've got like stuff to write on all over the house. So I'm always picking up the pen, jotting down those moments. ADHD is mentioned here. Yes. I think neurodivergent people have like academia in hard mode. I am neurodivergent myself, and there's some challenges there across the whole spectrum of neurodivergence that play out in all sorts of different ways for different people. I think higher ed's becoming more neurodivergent friendly, but it's not uniform, and it can be hard. So much empathy to you, Natasha. Sounding board, collaborators, every para you write, win 2 rounds of Mario Kart. I don't know, I think my Mario Kart skill to writing ratio is probably more every round of Mario Kart I win, I have to write 2 paragraphs. I don't know if that's a boast on the Mario Kart or the writing. Caffeine, yes. Library, place can matter for people. Notebook, Yes, all the time. I've got a notebook with me as well, or just some way to get it out. When I was writing my book, I just had a massive sort of Google Doc that I dumped stuff into whenever I had a thought. And I did that for a year, a massive unstructured pile of garbage for a year, loose references and whatever else. And then I turned that into a book relatively quickly because I had a long time to just dump the ideas. I've also seen recently people say to keep if you're writing something long like a book, to actually keep a little notebook around as you're in that planning phase and just have it on you all the time. So I'm planning on writing a second book soon, planning on doing that tiny notebook with me all the time to try and get the ideas out. Muck about in the garden, yeah. Talk with a friend, yeah. Explain it to someone new. Oh, that's so cool, yeah. For me, I do a lot of like talking to people about stuff before the thing gets written, and I'm really slow at writing things. I can tell you I got a final draft of a paper off to some colleagues that I've been writing since 2019 recently. And that delay is all on me. But the slowness of it, and I feel terrible to my colleagues, but the slowness of it is something that I think really led to a better quality piece. So just explaining it again and again and going through that slowness. Talking to ChatGPT Advanced Voice Mode is amazing, and it will just wait there. So you can just have it going, monitoring you, and I'm sure using the data for all sorts of bad things. But you can have it going for ages and talk back to it as you go. If you're reading a difficult text, you could just have the voice mode there going, and 5 minutes after you start it, you might find something that's hard, and you might say, oh, what does so-and-so really mean when they say this? And it'll have a go at explaining it to you. Work out how to teach something, yeah. Writing groups that are deadline focused, yes. And work in progress at conferences, absolutely. And someone I witnessed being really good with this is David Carlis. So he goes around to conferences and you can tell he's got kind of, it's usually a really good idea. It usually ends up in a great journal article, but it's not very polished, and he's just kind of trying it out on you and genuinely interested in the thoughts that you have to sharpen it. And I love that. I feel like I get a view of the latest cutting edge stuff he's working on, but also get to kind of shape things. All right. I'm going to move on to collaborating. I don't have heaps to say about collaboration. I'm not sure I'm the best collaborator as well. I cite that thing of, really delaying things as well. I think collaboration is really necessary and powerful, but for me, I'll just be honest with you, it's not actually my preferred mode of working. I am the lone wolf researcher, but I recognize that that's problematic and not necessarily good practice. So I have to push myself to collaborate. I have a few things that I try and sort of have in my mind when I'm doing collaboration. One of them is only one paper at a time with a new collaborator. I've been burned a few times meeting someone amazing, being like, wow, let's do everything. And we start everything and we finish nothing. And things are really hard after that. So if I meet someone new, start collaborating with someone I've wanted to for ages, and we only just now find a way, we get one paper submitted before we work on anything else. My second collaboration one is not doing unfunded empirical work unless there's a really good reason. I think this is a real trap for early career researchers. You do a lot of empirical work for free, out of passion, and it is so incredibly time consuming. And the sort of ratio of effort to research insights that you can gain from it is not always there. So be really strategic and careful with engaging in empirical work. We often have this obsession about, I've got to go get lots more data. A lot of us already have a lot of data that we could already be writing from, and yet we still go out and we collect more and more. So be real careful with that. Something I love to do with colleagues is conceptual papers, and I think they're a great start. And I would say if someone comes to you, and I do this, someone comes to me wanting to do some grand empirical project where there's no funding to pay for someone to do the actual hard work, I say let's just write a conceptual paper first to really get ourselves on the same page about what it is we're investigating and why this really matters. And you'll see the Cradle team's main impact has been through conceptual papers over the years. And finally, when I do want to do that empirical work, rather than jumping straight to doing it, working up that grant application could be just for a small internal grant, but a great way to build networks, assemble a team, get people together. I'd love you to tell us your sort of collaboration tips. What have you got? Because as I said, this is not my strong area.
We did have a special episode, didn't we, Puyin, of this series that was how not to kill your co-author.
Oh yes, we had one of those, didn't we? Luckily, nobody got killed. Last time I checked, everyone is still alive 2 years later. So, you know.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I think we can do harm to each other. The commented there about regular meetings and shared documents, absolutely. I think meetings, oh gosh, I hate meetings, but they are something that really can keep us accountable to each other and drive the work forward. And agreed on project manager as well. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I think who it is should really rotate around, but also some people are really good project managers and you can seek them out. Assigned tasks, yes, clarity on who's doing what. Oh, we've got the video for the How Not to Kill Your Co-Authors. That's really good. Shared space to write, use of comments when working at different times. Yeah, absolutely. Being clear about roles and shares of the project. Yeah, and things like authorship, early on having that conversation about authorship. There are structures and scaffolds to help you have that conversation as well. And definitions of what authorship means and all of that. Openness and honesty, yes. Software development project management methods. Yeah, I think that's a really smart one. I studied computer science myself and sadly did not learn that stuff very well. I kind of wish I could go back in time and relearn it. Shared values. Yeah, having been burnt a few times. Yeah. Trustworthiness, collegiality. Yeah. Thank you all. I'm going to talk to my last point, which is engaging. So I do all that stuff previously so that I can produce research that helps the world in some way. I don't do it for the sake of doing it. I don't do it for the pure joy of discovery or something like that. And I understand some people, we all have different motivations. But I also do it to have a career and feed my family, which relies on me having a reputation as a scholar. So these are the reasons why. And to achieve both of those first two dot points, I need to engage with the world. So I try and do less sort of research so I have the time to do more of the stuff that enables me to help the world and feed my family, more of the engagement stuff. Around sort of one fewer paper each year is what I set for myself. So when I'm thinking about what can I get done this year, I try and take a paper away from that and say, let's do a little bit less, but make the most of what we do. And again, I wish I could give you permission to do this, but if there's a way you can write one fewer paper, but get much more impact and effect for that paper by doing the work of getting it out there into the world, that's a good strategy. Too often we push people into doing as much research as they can possibly do and then expect them to layer engagement on top of it as if you are an endless source of time. You've got to find it from somewhere, and it's okay to find it from your research time. Now, a key thing that I do is a lot of talking. And my last sort of substantive thing that I want to talk with you about now is talking. I want to pitch that us in higher ed, teaching and learning as a field, we do two kinds of talks. We do research talks, where we go and we present to other people who are active researchers in our field. And with those people, we can use the jargon, we can refer to methodology without explaining it. We can talk like a research paper. But then we also do this other thing, which is kind of scholarship of teaching and learning presentations or even professional development work. And I think as a first thought about our engagement work with speaking, it's really valuable to split off which of these I'm doing. And when people try and pitch, or they show up to an event that expects one and they deliver the other, there can be great dissatisfaction or confusion. I'm going to openly say I almost never actually give a research talk. I give a lot of SOTL/professional development type talks. Probably the only conference that I would say I give an actual capital R research talk at would be the European Association for Research on Learning and Instruction. EARLI has a special interest group about assessment, and I can just talk assessment research there. Everywhere else, I'm probably doing the SOTL or professional development thing. If you get asked to do these SOTL and professional development things, I have some thoughts, and this is how I do my own work. I have one talk, and I'm going to really encourage you to get one amazing talk, a really great talk, and make that as great as it can be. It's worth investing time in that one. You'll see today I didn't invest a lot in these slides because this isn't that talk. This is one of the other ones. So if you've seen me do a talk where there were amazing slides, that's not this talk. Get that talk great and iterate it. Make it really great. Make it focused on something that's a real higher ed problem, something people actually really care about. And I've got there, not your work. I think this is another key thing with engagement. We want to engage with the world about our area and build that reputation and impact, but not try and be out there touting our work, saying, oh, you should read this paper of mine and that paper of mine and whatever else. That's not what people want when they're after someone to give a SOTL or professional development type thing. They want the field, the topic. So go out there, get something amazing, super polished. And then I'm going to say, do it for free when there's a big, diverse audience. But if you are asked to go to a single institution and give a professional development talk and take time away from your day job to do it, I think it's a reasonable expectation that your institution or you, depending on the layout of whatever your contract is, that your institution is paid for that, because otherwise you're doing free work for the other place and essentially saying that professional development and SOTL is not worth anything, that you can just get someone. They wouldn't get an IT consultant to come in and tell everyone how to use the computers for free, and they shouldn't get you to come in and tell everyone how to do teaching and learning for free. So that's a bit of a pitch. And again, the money that you get from that can be the thing that enables your research in an ongoing way. So this is my sort of last big pitch about the engagement work as a researcher. Taking this approach has really got me out there into the world. And it's also been a source of funding for research that research funders would never fund. That's got me going and helped me progress. I've never been able to get funding for any of the work that I do on cheating by a research funding body or whatever. They just seem uninterested in it. But I've brought in quite a lot of money from speaker fees, from the professional development stuff that I use to pay people who otherwise wouldn't have work in higher ed to work with me on this research and keep things going. And I mean, I have a sort of a final your tips on speaking as a strategy, but I might kind of segue into the we're done and, thank you, and just want to again acknowledge privilege and take everything I've said within the context of all our circumstances are different. So thank you so much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Phil. That was incredible. There was so much in that, and I've been madly scribbling down notes of things to look up. And try. We do have a few minutes left, so probably some time for questions if anyone has any. And a thank you from Lydia for her best commute of the week. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Phil, either popping them in the chat or unmuting so you can speak to us live? While people might be finding their voice, I also have some questions. One of the things you talked about was social media, and you are very good at sharing the work you've been doing and creating that conversation. Part of it might be to do with that hook, the addressing the problem, but it is also about finding your voice on social media without coming across with that. I'm sure everyone knows what I mean, and when I say the stereotypical LinkedIn humble brag vibe. How did you do that? How do you find your voice and contribute to that conversation in what is really a very building up people way?
Yeah, so early on, I had a chat with David Carlis about this, and he said to me, what do you think the ideal ratio is of sharing your own stuff versus sharing other people's stuff? And I'd never thought about that. This was real early on in my Twitter experiences, and I was just there sharing my own stuff all the time because I thought my own stuff was really cool. I think having a view towards, I'm actually here, just as I said about a talk, you're here to talk about an area. I'm on social media to talk about an area, about a concept. My work's part of that, but it's not most of it. It's just a piece of the puzzle. So I think that's really good. I think if we can adopt that kind of improv yes and to social media, it's really nice when we're able to do that. But also I've had my missteps. I've said, things that on reflection I've found, why was I so critical? That was probably hurtful to people, and I'm just learning and trying to get better with that. Yeah. So I think social media is hard. Other thing is I'm trying to get off Twitter because I think Twitter's become more and more toxic in the past year or so. And actually, LinkedIn sucks in terms of the hustle culture vibes. But on the other hand, everyone's on their best behavior because they think their future boss might be looking. So it kind of does temper people a little bit.
Well, we've got a nice little community on Blue Sky. So if you would like to jump across and join us on Blue Sky rather than Twitter, it'd be lovely to have you there as part of the conversation. And Priyan's put in another plug for that as well.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Thank you. The thing that's really resonated with me, I was back at the start. So I'm a PhD student, and you were talking about, where your H index was and that sort of stuff about getting a job. And it's very different, kettle of fish now for someone coming in as an early career researcher. So I just wonder sort of what advice you have for someone to try and navigate that, and I don't know, just generally, yeah.
I think firstly it's really hard. Or I think you might have to mute yourself. So I think it's really challenging, the current situation we're in, because those entry-level jobs where you can develop that track record to the point where you can then get an actual entry-level job now, they kind of don't exist. So I think it's trying to get involved in projects is probably part of it. If you're a PhD student, I think I really admire those cultures of supervision where students publish together with each other on their papers. I think that's really good. I think you don't, this is really hard. Publishing with some people who are big name scholars can be a great experience, but I do get people now approaching me with a fully written article wanting to publish it with me, and I say no to that. And I think that's what sometimes people think it is. But if you have something that is really great, really fascinating, and you do see a genuine role for one of the big scholars in your field, don't be afraid to approach them. the worst they can do is say no. So I think really trying to work with some of those people that you really admire. I think the earlier you can set yourself up as an independent researcher separate from your PhD supervisor, the better. It's still great to continue to publish with them, but establish your own thing and get going. And then finally, I'd say publish in really good places. So my first journals I submitted to as a post-PhD researcher were Review of Educational Research, Educational Researcher. I just went down the list, not kind of knowing that these were epic journals that were probably going to reject me. I just saw that they were the list and I just went for it, and I got lucky on a few bits. So I think kind of do be ambitious. You can only work down in like a journal list author. And I guess probably the other thing is, teaching also really matters, and teaching is a very valuable thing. And sometimes we think that higher ed careers are only successful if someone does heaps and heaps of research and whatever else. But I really admire those scholars who publish a fantastic paper every couple of years, but it really shapes the field and moves things forward. And I don't want to name who some of those are because it sounds like I'm dissing them for not being productive, but there are some in our field who shape the field by publishing a paper every few years. And that's way better than publishing just heaps of random, I tried this and it was good papers and appearing more productive.
We've got one more question in the chat that I think we'll take before I hand back over to Puyin. From Jim Turner, do you think being a journal reviewer is useful? And if so, in what way and how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I think it's really useful. Joe Tai from Cradle has led our work on evaluative judgment, which is your understanding of what quality work looks like and your ability to make judgments about the quality of your own work and the work of other people. And within the evaluative judgment work, it's been argued that the best way to develop it is to make lots of judgments, to provide lots of feedback on things. And that's what journal reviewing is for us as researchers. You get in there, you do a lot of it. I want journals to have a better culture of sort of co-review where we as supervisors might be encouraged to review a paper with our students. And I know in sort of medical science, it's quite common for that sort of thing to happen, for a supervisor to give a review to a student and then the review goes in under both of their names. And I'd love to see more of that. We want more sort of apprenticeship into reviewing, because I think it is really a kind of dangerous thing that we just, the first time someone reviews a paper, they just review it and it's this weighty decision, even though it's their first time ever making that sort of judgment. So I want more kind of scaffolding there.
Brilliant. So on that note, I am going to wrap up. Phil, thank you so much for being here, for joining us today, and as always, for being so generous with your insights and your suggestions. Also acknowledging the disclaimers you put at the beginning.